Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for joining us for these live broadcasts on the Car Dealer Magazine YouTube channel. Now today I am delighted to say we're chatting with our good old friend Rupert Pontin. He's Director of Insights at the vehicle data specialist Cazana. Hello Rupert.
Hi James, how are you?
Very, very well, thank you. Lovely to have you on as ever. Really do appreciate you giving up your time today. Now, on the show today, we're going to be chatting about used car values in January, how February is shaping up so far, and I'm going to be asking Rupert to do his best Mystic Meg impression and stare into his big crystal ball and give us a few predictions. Now, plenty to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so. This is a live show, so feel free to pop in any questions that you may have into the comments box and I'll do my best to put them to Rupert. But in the meantime, we'll start with mine. So Rupert, thanks for coming on. Before we get stuck into 2021, we haven't had you on the show for a little while. So I'd be keen to get your views on 2020, really. I mean, we spoke at various points last year and you and I were remarking on what an extraordinary year it was. I mean, how would you sum up the year briefly?
I would sum it up as better than many people expected. Let's be fair to ourselves. Let's be fair to the industry. We had a black swan event. We, as with the rest of the country, as with the rest of the world, faced some really, really big challenges. But as an industry, we did incredibly well. You can see figures that will report the number of new car registrations as being down. But you know what? It could have been a hell of a lot worse. And actually, I feel we should be celebrating the success that we had, both from a new car perspective and from a used car perspective. 2020 made people evaluate their business and their operational capacity and the way in which they work and accelerate it and move it forward to what is now, you have to say, match fit, because this is the way at the moment, this is our new normal, and 2020 just accelerated that whole process. So we should congratulate and celebrate what we achieved during the year.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more on that. Now, there were some weird trends that appeared or cropped up during 2020. I mean, I'm thinking sports cars and even those very unfashionable MPVs. I mean, you and I spoke at various points and it was quite extraordinary, the trends that came through, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. You look across the year, and I think there were various areas that were special. You touched on sports cars, and I can kind of understand that. I accept that there have been a number of people that have not been, have lost their jobs, have been suffering with financial difficulty. But actually, generally speaking, the majority of people have had more money. They haven't been able to go out and spend. They haven't been able to go on holiday and so forth. And actually, part of the success of the market last year was people that had put some money aside and decided they were going to spend it on a sports car, whether that be £2,000 worth of Mazda MX-5 or whether that be £40,000 worth of Porsche Boxster, whatever it may be. And I think that the fact that people have had a little bit more disposable income has improved that marketplace. The MPV side of things has been interesting, and that has been all around people wanting to travel in their own space. And we did see significant changes in pricing in the middle of the year where, we were coming out of lockdown, people were concerned about moving around, they didn't want to be on trains and so forth. And of course, that leads into the other area, which was the old car sector, where people are buying a second, a third car, whatever it is, just to stop them getting on that bus, to stop them being around other people and putting themselves at risk. And that really did help the market.
Yeah. But I also think that once people have, perhaps they caught the train to work, perhaps they caught the bus to work or the tube or whatever, if they've been forced down the private car ownership route for all of those reasons that you've just said, it's very difficult to get those people back out of those cars again, isn't it? And I think we're going to be seeing this for quite a long time now, aren't we? Where people have said no to public transport because they've invested in a second or a third or even a first car. And I think those trends are probably here to stay for quite a while, aren't they?
I would agree with you. As a society, we've worked a long time to try and get people to adopt public transport. And it's not been easy because public transport is not the cheapest way to travel to many people, because, you know, you'll see a price of a train ticket and you tend to forget that your car over the course of a year costs you an awful lot of money. But, you know, for me, £120 return into London, and I live 90 to 100 miles away from it, that doesn't sound great value on the face of it, but actually it probably is. In terms of people moving to their own vehicles, we've gone back a step. We've turned away from public transport, but it is giving people more freedom, and they will get used to sitting in that car, listening to whatever they want on the radio, you know, doing whatever they want to do, drifting along, actually enjoying driving a car. One of the things I was reflecting on over this weekend is I did buy a new car 3 months ago, and I've done 2,641 miles in it. Usually I would do that in a month. Yeah. Things have changed, and we are going to go back to people using vehicles more often. What bothers me perhaps is the level of emissions that we will see increasing, whether that be from petrol or diesel vehicles, more so actually from petrol, because the CO2 is rising from petrol vehicles more than I think anybody anticipated.
Yeah. Now, we've started 2021 with another lockdown, but it feels a very different kind of lockdown this time round compared to March, April and May.
Yeah.
What have you been seeing in January? I mean, is the market still buoyant, or is the market fluctuating a lot more than it did in 2020?
So the beginning of a new year is always interesting because you quite often get a lot of people, a lot of dealers who want to have a sale to promote vehicle, to promote business. And that can impact on how your figures and how the market reacts over the course of a month. This year has been quite different. So you're right, in comparison with lockdown 1, we're in a different place because people can still have a vehicle, they can still buy a car, they can still have it delivered. Yeah, that's the key thing. So from a transactional point of view, we're probably looking at sales levels around 70% of what perhaps they would ordinarily be. Now that's quite an achievement. Yeah, that really is. So that's a good positive thing. The technology and the way people operate retailers has changed significantly since lockdown 1. Much more capability to have viewings online, to be able to sort your finance online, etc., etc. So that's good. What have we seen in sales consistency? Actually, the first week of January was quite poor. The second week, sales increased by somewhere around 123% on the previous week, which sounds fabulous, and it was, but remember we were coming from a low point. Consumer confidence has increased in the automotive sector during the course of the month, not in the economy overall, which is interesting. And the automotive sector has always performed better. Realistically speaking, though, the month actually was quite good. I'm going to glance slightly away from you because I have some figures on the screen, which I should have put on that screen. But from a sales point of view, sales in January were up 60% on where they were in December. From a point of view of volume of listings, we're 8.1% down in January in relation to where we were in December. That's not a great problem. The average price of vehicles has come down to 11,650. That's 14.3% down, which is interesting, which might signify that we're looking at sale data here. Yeah, so that could signify that there's been more activity in the lower end of the market, the older cars. And I'll come back to that. And the price index, the Cazana price index, is down 2% from last month. But let's be fair, year on year, it's 6% up. So that's good. So that shows that pricing is increasing. But yeah, that's how we see the market at the moment. It's good. You know, if you're generating the leads correctly through having that virtual showroom online, showing your vehicles, pricing them correctly, then you're generating leads and people buy cars. Here's the important thing to remember though, James. What is apparent is that people want to buy what they want. They're not being attracted by a cheap car. So example, we deal with a number of major dealer groups throughout that cover the UK. And a couple of those have actually been through the exercise of, hey, let's try some sale activity, see if we can increase volume. The net result has been volume hasn't really increased. All they've done is narrow their margin. So they've reverted back to keeping the price where the retail market is, on the basis that if you or I are looking for a car, we want that BMW X5 in purple with the green seats. That's what we want. And we're not going to get distracted by a car that's £1,000 cheaper that has red seats. And that's the interesting thing, I think, about this market. You know, people do have a little bit more disposable income, and they are determined to buy what they want rather than what a dealer might try and push on them through a sale period.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating point. I mean, I think a lot of that is influenced by people. Potentially people have got more time on their hands, or they're at home and they can search for cars more easily. But not only that, there are so many online tools available that people are being picky, aren't they? You don't have to see a car online and then, oh, I'm going to have to go and visit the dealer to have a look at that car. Oh, it's got black seats as opposed to beige seats. Oh, okay, I'll just put up with that. The more online tools people have got at their fingertips, they're able to make those fussy, informed decisions.
Yeah, they are. They can be really, really specific about what they're looking for. They can see it. No, they can't touch it. But, if you're buying online these days, most companies are offering some form of 2 weeks or something like that. If you don't like it, send the car back, subject to mileage charges and any damage, which is absolutely correct. But how different are we now to where we were in January 2020? The ability to do that, not just with a limited number of people, but with most car dealers in the UK is absolutely amazing. And what I applaud is the fact that we are in lockdown 3, and probably 95% of dealer groups and retailers are actually sticking to the rules, and they are adhering to the fact that, no, you can't come and drive the car, you can't come and walk around my forecourt, and that is a really, really good place to be. I'm very pleased to see that. There are, and I refer back to my comment about older vehicles, I am aware that some of the smaller dealers are not sticking to those rules, which I think is interesting, disappointing, but actually perhaps explains why we're seeing so much of that activity and price differential in the older end of the market. Made a mistake. Every week, prices move enormously. I've just got the latest set of data through, and I'll be looking at it in the next couple of hours. But retail pricing has changed across a variety of different sectors just in the last week.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see that, generally speaking, the industry is adhering to all the rules that are in place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important point to make, that it's a very small minority who are potentially breaking the rules.
I totally agree.
Yeah, but do you think that's possibly down to that they haven't got the online tools, or they know that there is a captive market out there? People want to buy cars, and so if it means that a customer just looks around the forecourt, no one's really going to know. If it means that they sell a car, they're going to do it.
So this is a really difficult thing. We are talking about smaller dealers that, you're right, don't have the online presence that some other people do. The difficulty is that, they need to keep their business going. And if there's an opportunity to sell a car, they will. What is disappointing is perhaps the volume, and it is a small number, but the volume of people that are prepared to say, forget it, come and see the car, fella. We'll have a walk around. You can drive the car. I'll sit in the car with you. Happy days, you can buy the car. I understand the difficulties that they face, but as a nation, as a world, what are we even doing? Why are we even entertaining that? And it's not just the dealer, right? Because as a buyer, whoever that buyer is, what are they thinking? Why are they doing it too? So it's not a criticism of that individual business per se. It is a fault then perhaps with society, that we're prepared to do something like that.
No, I totally agree, and I've heard from plenty of dealers they're following the rules. They're not letting people take test drives or look around forecourts, and yet they're still getting requests from customers. Look, why can't I take a test drive? So it's also coming from customers as well, isn't it? But let's stick with that theme of forecourts. Now, a common theme last year was it was very difficult for dealers to get hold of high quality stock, partly due to high stock turnover, but also because of the supply network. There were problems actually physically getting cars to forecourts. Is that still an issue, or have those have you seen any of those problems being ironed out recently?
So I think the remarketing sector has done a fantastic job of it. They were faced with some really, really difficult circumstances, not being able to deliver vehicles, not allowing people on site to collect vehicles, if you're talking about auction companies and so forth. And we've come an awfully long way from there. I think there are still difficulties. Whilst we've got used to working in a different way, that's great. One of the, and this is a difficult topic to touch on, but one of the biggest problems actually for the remarketing sector and for the fulfillment of those deliveries is the fact that the cost has gone up significantly. Yet the dealer, the industry as a whole, is not open to seeing delivery costs increase, and that makes it very, very difficult for them to be able to cope with such a different work environment. So I think the answer is, in short, yes, things have got an awful lot better. Are there still issues from time to time? Yes, there are. What I would also say is, a lot of dealers are experiencing and enjoying bigger margins. Please bear in mind that the poor guys delivering the vehicles, they've not been able to almost in some cases cover their costs. They are doing it because they need to do it to keep the industry moving. But we're all in business to make a profit. We're all in business to deliver a service, whether that be to a consumer who's buying a vehicle, or whether that be to a dealer who's having a car delivered. And I think it's been very, very, very hard for those guys.
Yeah. Now, another big thing that happened last year was the launch of a handful of online, direct to consumer companies like Cazoo, Cazana, Cinch. Companies like that. Now, it's difficult to sort of know the short-term effects of these companies in the marketplace because they're so new, and of course we've had various lockdowns last year. But for the long term, do you think these operations could have a lasting effect on the used car market? I mean, are they going to affect values, or is it just too difficult to say at the moment?
So this is very interesting. So first of all, one has to say that the arrival of these companies, 18 months or so ago, people looked at it and they said, "Well, what happened with Virgin Cars? What happened with Tesco Cars, etc., etc." I'm not sure that the industry is ready for it or not. Well, do you know what? This year, 2020, has proven that the industry is ready for it. Actually, from their perspective, COVID has helped them enormously. But as I said earlier, it's also helped the industry as a whole because it's accelerated the adoption of online selling strategies. The interesting thing to watch will be what volume of people continue to purchase from what is almost a separate business area for us. So from Cazana's point of view, we provide pricing that is based on retail pricing as a whole in the marketplace and trade price as a whole, but we also segment it down to a franchise dealer, an independent dealer, and a supermarket dealer. And actually what we're beginning to see is that there is another differential for the type of online pricing that we see. An online retailer works very quite differently from a traditional dealer. They work with the type of data we provide online, real-time, retail pricing information. They are very, very, very live in the ways in which they change their pricing on a day-by-day basis to identify opportunities in the marketplace and avoid themselves getting into difficulties. And that's what Cazana is all about, helping people to move to that place. But it's really, really interesting to see that actually there is a slightly different price point appearing, perhaps. From our perspective, we'll need to report that to our customers. So they're here to stay for sure. It will be interesting to see how the traditional retailers adapt themselves to meet what is essentially another challenge. It's nothing to be scared of for the traditional dealers. It's just another challenge. But you do need to be working quickly with data and to be able to react very, very swiftly to any form of market change. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, can we just take a look at fuel types for a moment?
Sure.
Let's start with diesel. Now, diesels were declining before coronavirus anyway.
Yeah.
With a shift in working practices, fewer fleet drivers on the roads, there's really quite a downward spiral, really. I mean, is there still a market for diesels, and could values ever sort of come back strongly, do you think?
So there is still a market for diesel. And once we come out of lockdown, there will be a proportion of business travelers that need to do high mileage again. We will have moved that needle towards more remote working. That is more acceptable. There will still be people that need to travel long distances. There will also be people that choose to travel long distances. And right now, diesel will still have a place. Let's not forget that the emissions that come from a diesel car in terms of damage to the environment as a whole are fairly similar to a new petrol car. So there's a parity there. The press has chosen to almost victimize, in some respects, that diesel car more than they have a petrol, rightly or wrongly. Who on earth would have imagined that we'd be seeing a diesel registration volume of around 16% of the market? You know, really, we wouldn't have seen that. It was promoted so heavily. They do have a place. What is interesting is that in this road to 2030, where we are transitioning to new fuel types, which is a good thing, it's going to help the environment from an emissions point of view. There is some discussion around how you create that vehicle, you know, in terms of damage to the environment per se before it arrives. But actually, once it's here, it's a great place to be. But as we head towards 2030 and the volume of diesel cars continues to diminish in the marketplace, there will still be a demand for those people that live in rural areas, actually, that you know, they're quite happy to rumble around in a diesel. They're comparable to a petrol, but you understand what I'm saying. And I think that we will find that there is a market for a diesel for quite a long time to come. What is interesting will be to watch how the prices increase in terms of residual value as a percentage of original cost new is a fairly good measure. We are already seeing, if you look at the trend in 2020, you will see the diesel averaging as a percentage of cost new is going upwards. Petrol is slightly upwards. Hybrid vehicles are coming down, and battery electric vehicles are all over the place. Now, that's in part to do with volumes in the marketplace, and the type of vehicle that might appear in the retail marketplace, and therefore the demand that comes from it. But the trend is still upwards, and that will continue for a while. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the more of those cars that come into the marketplace, then they will plateau and it will start to drop in the same way that hybrid has.
Yeah. You sort of lead me on to my next question, which is about electric cars and specifically battery electric cars. Now, you know, every single month there are new cars coming to the market, but also new cars coming into the vehicle park as well. And yet we're still seeing fluctuating values and activity, aren't we? It must be quite difficult for a dealer to say, right, I'm going to go all out here and I'm really going to embrace this electric trend and stock electric cars, when they know that the values of petrols and diesels are a little bit more stable, aren't they?
Yeah, there is a big risk factor. There has been for some years. I think it's going to get better from this point onwards. The difficulty is in part around the dealer, the retailer being able to explain what that car can do for an individual customer. I think there's still not enough clarity. If you were to walk into your local dealer and you were to look at, well, you test drove one recently, the Citroen Ami, yeah? Okay, yeah, which is a really interesting vehicle. But actually, does the dealer properly understand what sort of customer should use that vehicle? I think it's clear cut in that instance. But actually, if I were to walk into my local dealer and say, do you know what, I'm thinking of getting an electric car, they may not, still may not have the process and the you know, the ability to be able to say, do you know what, Rupert, how many miles do you do a year? Where do you travel to? How often do you travel more than 2 hours in a car? Do you do more than 350 miles in a day? That element actually is still missing, because it's quite easy to say, oh, you drive a lot, right? You need a diesel, mate. Come over here. And that's the thing. So I think there's still a lot to be done in that respect. The other thing about battery electric vehicles, which we're seeing, is we're now getting to a point where range anxiety isn't a thing, and it shouldn't be a thing. You know, you look at the Tesla Model 3 with the long range capacity, it's over 300 miles. How many people drive more than 300 miles in one go? And should they even be doing that? You know, from a safety perspective. So that car is a real world usable vehicle. There are other vehicles that are in the 200s in terms of ranges. You know, arguably that is a real range, a real world range. And the other side of it, where you talk about the sustainability and the ability to charge a vehicle, let us also remember that we're not talking about cars that need charging every 60 miles anymore. There is a bit of an offset that you will get from a longer range vehicle. How many times do you need to charge a car in a week if it's got a 300-mile range, in comparison to I need to charge it twice just in case? That's a big difference. Doesn't address the urban area piece, I understand that, but maybe the change in mobility as a service and the usage of the Citroen Ami in urban areas, as you have experienced through some form of subscription service, is the way to overcome that.
Yeah, no, it really is interesting, isn't it? And the longer the time march, well, the quicker time marches on, the more those range anxiety issues, they do sort of filter into the background, because people are just becoming more accepting of the fact that a car with 200-mile range is absolutely fine. Whereas, not that long ago, you'd expect a diesel to have a 600-mile range, and I've got to have a car with 400-mile range in my car. It's fascinating, really is.
Let's be real. I used to drive around 35,000 miles a year, and my biggest day was usually if I trekked down to, say, Cardiff from where I am and back, and that would be a 350-mile round trip. Yeah. How often did I do that? Not that often. And the reality is, even by today's standards, you're pretty much getting to the point that I could do that with an electric car, get home, plug it in, go to bed, and be up to do the same journey the next morning.
Yeah.
Hey, that's where we need to be, and we should applaud ourselves for being in that position, and help through understanding, whether that be through a retailer. And I'm not just picking on retailers, it's as much the same in the business marketplace, the contract hire and leasing companies. Some of them have specialists that deal with this, and that's important to help people understand what car is going to be appropriate for the usage that they give it, and it's going to benefit us all.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball now and just...
Let me look in my drawer, see if I've got one today. No, I don't. Right. Okay, come on. Ask away.
Just a few predictions in terms of what we're likely to be seeing in the next couple of months, or the next month or so, really. And how much of all of this is going to be influenced by how long this lockdown goes on for?
So we will get to an end of lockdown in, where are we, beginning of February, probably in the next 8 weeks or so. Once we get to the end of lockdown, I expect there to be a bit of a sales push. And I think that there is some pent-up demand. Not everybody wants to buy online. It's getting better, but there are still people that will want to go and buy a car. They will want to see the car, drive the car, and enjoy that dealer retailer experience, which is still very important to some people, and it will come back. So I expect that we will see, perhaps at the end of that lockdown period, a bit of a shortage of stock, a push on demand. I think retail pricing, and this is a personal feeling that is not based on the data that we're seeing, but I personally think that we'll continue to see prices rising. Not a huge amount. Certainly the indications from the data would suggest that that's the case. If you look at the historical performance of the previous 2 lockdowns, once you come out, things do get better. So I think that's probably where we'll go. The business marketplace will have some vehicles that it needs to churn. So the profile of stock in the market is going to change. And we need to watch that actually through the entire year. Lower mileage vehicles coming to the marketplace. That naturally will increase retail pricing. And I think that overall, the used car market, on the basis that we are going to have a successful vaccination process, it's looking pretty good for the year.
Well, that is a perfect way to end, and I do sort of agree with you on a lot of that. I mean, looking back at the last 2 lockdowns, there is every reason to suggest that the end of lockdown 3 will mirror lockdowns 1 and 2 in a slightly similar fashion. So
it won't be quite as strong, James. It won't be quite as strong because we've adapted to actually selling vehicles online.
Exactly.
But yeah. I still think that we're going to see a bit of a push.
Yeah. And I think let's have a sense of optimism. And going back to how we started this interview, which was, dealers have done a remarkable job,
yes.
Particularly during January. I think everybody needs to pat themselves on the back a little bit, really, and be happy.
Totally agree with you.
Fantastic, Rupert. Well, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but thank you as ever for joining us. Some fantastic insight there, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, James. It's great to see you. Take care.
So that's it for today's show. If you'd like to be involved in a Car Dealer Live just like this one, then please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk. But until next time, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.